Hi, my daughter lives here. I got a call from 2 cousins. My son murdered them.
Yes, this is my daughter's house. A pair of cousins just called me. They claimed my boy slaughtered the whole family. Authorities pull up to the residence to speak with the mother of 41-year-old Martin Muniz, following chilling tips that her son had just annihilated his own flesh and blood. Within moments, these patrolmen will breach the threshold, completely oblivious to the fact that they are stepping into the darkest, most gruesome tableau of their law enforcement tenure. She's authorizing us to enter. Forget it. We have probable cause to breach. God, it's a bloodbath. Dispatch emergency medical right now. Beyond that front door lay 5 victims. The mother's immediate relatives had been gunned down without mercy, leaving a grim scene of death and desperate clings to survival. Meanwhile, the architect of this slaughter surrendered himself without a fight, stating, "I mean every word. I am perfectly sane. Drive over to the house and see it for yourselves." Investigators soon realized they had a prolific predator in custody. Exterminating his own relatives might not have been Martin's inaugural taste of bloodshed. "This is not my first rodeo taking a life. I did the deed. Put it on the record, it makes no difference to me." On October 30, 2023, Ohio patrolmen were enjoying a quiet meal break when a sudden tap on their cruiser glass shattered the silence. A 41-year-old figure named Martin Muniz emerged from the shadows, delivering a sinister confession before the body cams even began recording. "I committed a terrible act. I am dead serious. My mind is completely sound. I need you to place me in cuffs." "Okay, give me a second to pull the cruiser forward." "What on earth?" "We have a civilian approaching the vehicle." The suspect walked right up to the window and admitted to a severe crime. Backup units were immediately routed to the suspect's provided location. The responding units were utterly bewildered, much like the original patrolman who had been focused on their sandwiches rather than the walking nightmare presenting himself. Cruisers pulled up to the residence that served as Martin Muniz's current living quarters. The property belonged to his sister, Angelic Gonzalez, residing there with her spouse, Anthony Boothe, and the siblings' patriarch, Miguel Gonzalez. Angelic's teenage son and adolescent daughter shared the roof. At first glance, law enforcement prayed this was merely a delusional transient spinning grim fairy tales. However, stepping onto the property quickly shattered any illusions of a false alarm. "I merely eliminated 5 individuals. Where do you need me? This is my girl's house. A couple of relatives reached out to me. My boy slaughtered everyone. I have no idea what happened. I arrived but felt terrified to approach the entryway alone. I stayed back for the police. My boy is gone. I cannot fathom that he turned himself in to you. Can you identify these relatives? Does the suspect suffer from psychiatric issues? Talk to me." "The one who did this, my boy." "Correct. He served 20 years behind bars. He terrifies me." "What did he serve time for?" "A laundry list of offenses, mostly brutal assaults." "Stay right here and do not move." "I did not see a single soul in there. Please, officer." "Clear. Police department. We have a victim on the mattress. This is not a drill. Get medics here." In the master quarters, investigators stumbled upon 35-year-old Angelic Gonzalez, lifeless from ballistic trauma. The tactical sweep subsequently revealed 4 additional casualties scattered across separate chambers, all executed in an identical fashion. 16-year-old Jayden Baez, her teenage boy, Anthony Boothe, her spouse, and Miguel Gonzalez, the family patriarch. Tucked away in a rear sleep space lay Iana, the smallest child, barely hanging onto a fading pulse. Medics frantically transported her to a trauma center, miraculously allowing her to survive the ordeal. Tragically, the rest perished. Martin had methodically wiped out his bloodline sister, sibling-in-law, adolescent nephew, and the very man who raised him. One might assume that orchestrating such a biblical betrayal would break the psyche of even the most hardened criminal. Yet, the killer felt completely vindicated. Handcuffed in the interrogation room, he instantly signed away his right to silence, ready to unpack the grim mechanics of his slaughter. The suspect laid out the butchery with chilling precision, utterly devoid of human remorse. Mr. Muniz, Investigator Schultz, and myself, Chuck and I are walking into this blind. We need you to walk us through tonight's events. Look, I attempted to execute my sister's entire household, but a pair of them miraculously survived. 2 actually pulled through. The remaining 3 flatlined. What was the catalyst for this? Simply the disrespectful manner in which society handles me. Mr. Muniz claimed that after his release, he kept a low profile. He insisted he sought employment, confident his background checks would verify this. He described a desperate search for work, attending interviews and seeking help at Catholic parishes, yet remaining chronically unemployed. Resentment brewed over dinner. He alleged his family devoured the meals, leaving him nothing, and coldly dismissed his hunger as a personal problem. This quiet, domestic tension festered for several agonizing months. He recalled walking 11 miles for work until his feet blistered. Denied access to their 2 vehicles, he felt this perceived betrayal justified murder. When investigators pressed him about his tenure in the home, he admitted staying there for only a couple of months. Detectives probed further into Mr. Muniz's dark history, questioning exactly how much time had passed since his release from incarceration. The suspect calmly confirmed he had enjoyed 4 years of freedom. Asked if he had resided with his sister permanently, he revealed a transient past, detailing stints in Texas and Jersey. He also mentioned drifting through Illinois. The interrogation shifted, asking Mr. Muniz to meticulously outline the evening's horrific sequence. He began his chilling recounting, stating he had simply gone upstairs for dinner, initially approaching a family patriarch. Quickly correcting himself, he noted confronting his sister's son Jayden, demanding his share of the meal, only to learn nothing remained. Muniz described his growing agitation at the empty kitchen. The nephew offered zero sympathy, brushing off the suspect's hunger with sheer indifference. Escalating the dispute, he tracked down his sister, demanding immediate answers about the missing dinner. Her dismissive ignorance only fueled his rage. She questioned his motives, prompting him to darkly emphasize his empty stomach. He issued a grim warning that trouble was brewing, met with dead, apathetic silence. Consequently, investigators pressed him on his exact movements after fleeing the blood-stained residence. When questioned about the firearm's hidden location, he claimed complete ignorance. Detectives probed deeper, trying to confirm if he had carried the lethal weapon out into the night. Admitting the firearm was on his person, he casually noted he discarded it into the shadows somewhere during his escape. Taking it was a calculated move. In a terrifyingly blunt admission, he confessed this was not his first murder. He alluded to a previous lethal encounter, nonchalantly directing the detective's attention to an incident over in Jersey. He named Jaime, a victim from October 30, 2013, prompting detectives to seek a motive. The justification was a simple robbery. He confidently challenged the authorities to verify his dark boast. Within 3 minutes, the suspect surrendered more incriminating intelligence than seasoned detectives typically extract over hours of intense questioning. While this rapid-fire confession might echo the empty bravado of a criminal seeking infamy, the chilling reality proved otherwise. Currently, Martin faces the weight of the justice system for the execution of 45-year-old Jaime Molina. Gunned down in Camden, New Jersey, in 2013, the case sat cold until Martin's psychopathic nature surfaced. Deviating from the typical deceptive playbook of a serial offender, his lethal transparency was horribly accurate. This brutal honesty birthed an unparalleled piece of interrogation footage. The psychological duel continued as detectives inquired if his getaway was on foot. He coldly confirmed walking away into the dark. The investigator traced his phantom footsteps toward Clark Avenue, questioning if that was his chosen path of escape. Acknowledging the route, he confessed his goal was surrendering to a uniform, believing society was no place for a monster like him. Expressing profound detachment from civilian life, he coldly stated the authorities made a fatal error by granting his freedom. Interrogators pressed for granular details about his exact pedestrian trajectory after slipping out of the crime scene. Claiming a mental fog, he was driven by a primal urge to return to his institutional sanctuary, completely indifferent to law enforcement. The massive police dragnet meant nothing to him. His singular focus was a permanent return to a concrete cell. Asked to define this desired sanctuary, he answered without hesitation, a prison cell. Craving nothing but isolation, he eagerly invited the charges, instructing officers to document his apathy toward the atrocities. Pushed to reconstruct the massacre, he detailed marching into his sibling's bedroom, selecting Tone as his initial target. The detectives carefully verified the victim's street name, Tone. Questioned if Anthony was the 16-year-old, the killer clarified his first victim was simply the first man he encountered. He elaborated, coldly identifying the doomed man as his sister's husband. The final detail was devastating. His sister raised her hands in a desperate plea for mercy before he pulled the trigger. Stepping out of the corridor, Martin encountered his niece, who simply asked how he was holding up. At that exact moment, a chilling hesitation crept in. He possessed no desire to pull the trigger or end her life. Consequently, he spared her in that hallway, reserving his lethal intent exclusively for the young boy. Ascending the staircase with dark purpose, he located his target and fired. The victim was Angel. Descending back to the lower level, he slipped into his sister's bedroom to unleash another round into Tone, subsequently moving toward his sister to fire a single execution-style shot directly into her back. When later questioned about whether his niece sustained any gunfire, the killer admitted he did wound her, though he maintained it was never intended to be a fatal strike. He coldly rationalized that she posed zero threat to his plans, insisting he never harbored any intention of executing her child. Yet, his twisted logic quickly unraveled into a deeply apathetic confession of sheer uncertainty. He reiterated that sparing her existence was a conscious choice, born from a sudden, inexplicable lack of murderous intent. Regarding the deceased victim on the upper floor, Martin claimed the young man had attempted to flee the ongoing carnage unnoticed. That desperate bid for escape ultimately sealed the victim's gruesome fate. Investigators noted that Mr. Muniz had only been released from state custody 4 years prior, specifically during the final months of 2018. His criminal record spanned a staggering 21 years behind bars, punctuated by merely 4 brief, fleeting stints of freedom. The suspect casually confirmed this bleak cycle of transient liberty without an ounce of remorse. The violent trajectory had fundamentally shifted on December 13, 2013, when law enforcement finally apprehended him. At the time of his arrest, he was carrying the exact firearm used to eliminate Jaime, strategically pleading guilty to the weapons charge to deflect attention from the undiscovered homicide. This highly calculated maneuver earned him a relatively manageable 5-year sentence. Martin had practically institutionalized himself, accumulating a lifetime of incarcerations for a remarkably wide array of criminal offenses. Back in 2002, authorities apprehended him for a brutal domestic assault, wherein he mercilessly battered his partner while her 4 children watched in terror. The justice system handed down a mere 3-month sentence. Shortly after his release in early 2003, he retaliated by returning to the woman's property and incinerating it to ash. Such rapidly escalating violence casts a dark, disturbing shadow over the effectiveness of lenient, short-term penal judgments. Following his incarceration for the Blazing Inferno, he fell into a relentless, revolving door of parole violations. These infractions largely involved intoxicated driving and operating vehicles without proper licensing, proving the suspect's own assertion that he was a profound danger to civil society. The lingering tragedy lies in society's delayed recognition of his psychological threat. During interrogations, he cited a morning robbery as the primary catalyst for Jaime's execution. The suspect confirmed that the fatal grievance stemmed directly from an aggressive confrontation earlier that same day. While being held at gunpoint, Martin allegedly offered his cash freely, warning his inexperienced assailant that a panicked armed robber was far more likely to cause accidental bloodshed. This masterful psychological manipulation caused the thief to tremble visibly under the pressure. Playing the seasoned underworld veteran, Martin advised the jittery attacker to simply take the funds and vanish, promising no retaliation in accordance with the unspoken rules of the streets. However, the aggressor persisted, escalating the encounter by striking Martin with the pistol, a fatal miscalculation that allowed the victim to catch a clear, identifying glimpse of his attacker's face. Taking meticulous mental notes, Martin observed institutional footwear, standard-issue sweatpants, and a makeshift facial covering before the thief vanished into the neighborhood. After procuring a firearm through illicit channels, Martin began stalking the concrete grid, eventually spotting his marked target crossing the asphalt between 3 and 4 o'clock. Like a predator tracking its prey, he shadowed the man from a calculated, silent distance. The target approached a residential entryway, pounding aggressively on the threshold before retreating back toward the public pavement. Opting for tactical patience, the stalker temporarily disengaged, melting back into the freezing December air. He surmised that the doomed thief was either frantically searching for someone or serving as a neighborhood lookout. The climax arrived on Friday, December 13, 2013, triggered bizarrely by 3 children hurling snowballs at a passing police cruiser. Carrying illicit narcotics, Martin panicked, even contemplating offering the youths $500 apiece to cease their disruptive behavior so he could slip away into the shadows. His desperate bribery attempt proved futile as a responding local officer, known to the streets as Chief, abruptly intervened. The lawman intercepted Martin's vehicle, forcefully extracting him, while the suspect voluntarily confessed to carrying the very weapon used to end Jaime's life. Following a physically rough apprehension, he faced a seemingly insurmountable judicial battle. originally staring down a staggering potential sentence of 51 years and 9 months. Calculating his odds of survival, the seasoned criminal recognized that his presiding magistrate possessed a background in family court proceedings. He expertly manipulated the bench's sympathies by fabricating a tragic narrative about his mother suffering from terminal lung cancer, prompting the judge to ask how he wished to proceed. Seizing the psychological opening, he offered an immediate guilty plea for a lesser firearms violation, securing a swift transfer to a local facility rather than facing decades in a maximum security cell. Just prior to his anticipated taste of freedom, a pair of homicide detectives, a woman and her bald partner, paid him a highly unexpected visit inside the penitentiary walls. Their intense line of questioning heavily implied that forensic experts had finally matched ballistics from his confiscated pistol to an unsolved, cold-blooded murder. Throughout the suffocating interrogation, the cornered inmate repeatedly demanded to know if they were officially preparing to pin a homicide charge on him. He demanded answers on 3 separate, tense occasions. Following that final attempt, the silence became absolute and unnerving. A desperate psychological urge to escape the room took hold. Investigators discovered zero evidence suggesting Jaime attempted any theft against Martin before taking his final breath. The lethal strike occurred just before 1:30 in the afternoon on October 30, targeting the busy street vendor. Authorities detained Martin in December 2013, securing the exact firearm responsible for Jaime's demise during that apprehension. By April 2015, forensics directly linked his confiscated weapon to the one that ended Jaime. Yet, no homicide charges ever materialized for Jaime. This dark chapter unfolded somewhere within New Jersey's borders. Jaime perished right on the edge of Northgate Park, specifically the notorious grounds of Northgate Park, deep inside North Camden, the northern sector. Documented precisely as CAMDN, spelling it out clearly, CAMDEN, records pointed to October 30 in the year 2013. An autumn tragedy. The fallen was Jaime. His full identity was recorded in the files as Jaime Molina. The surname letters read MOLEN in OLE, then trailing off into LIMAMA affirmative. Witness descriptions shifted unreliably before finally settling on a Hispanic male. A chilling detachment veiled his confession. He claimed no knowledge of the boy, dismissing the fatal retaliation as a response to a mugging. Uncertainty completely clouded the specifics regarding their actual age difference. He profiled his target as a desperate, opportunistic street punk who simply saw an easy mark and decided to aggressively initiate a shakedown for quick cash. The assailant had likely surveilled him for 48 hours, looking ragged in standard-issue institutional gear and cheap sneakers when the violent physical altercation began. Interrogators assumed the fatal gunfire erupted around 4 o'clock before dawn. He coldly clarified the theft happened early, while the lethal retaliation took place later that afternoon, sometime past 3 o'clock. The precise window of bloodshed fell somewhere between 3 and 4 o'clock. Moments before stepping into the street, a female relative delivered a dark omen, warning him of the neighborhood's heavy history of sudden death. Unfazed by the morbid warning, he stalked 2 blocks over, turning a corner only to spot his prey wearing that exact same rugged outfit. Quietly tracking his mark, he watched the unsuspecting target feign a casual visit at a nearby residence to avoid arousing suspicion. The property was a seemingly quiet blue structure situated exactly 2 doors away from the recreation area's entrance. Mid-knock, the mark noticed his pursuer, slowly descending the porch stairs to stand awkwardly on a small patch of dirt. A few cold words were immediately exchanged across the grass. Panic widened the victim's eyes right as the weapon fired. The shooter recognized him from a previous encounter dating back to 2007. A pair of major crimes detectives had previously cornered the suspect for questioning. A female investigator admitted their case was crumbling, plagued by a total absence of credible bystanders, leads, or physical evidence. Her silent male partner watched as she expressed sheer frustration that a daytime shooting beside a public playground yielded absolutely no cooperative witnesses. The suspect merely offered a detached, calculated shrug of complete ignorance. The psychological trap sprang shut when she revealed his confiscated firearm was the exact weapon used, pressing him for its true origin. His alibi involved a midnight mugging on Broadway, where he supposedly disarmed an unknown assailant, prompting the detective to mention local street cameras. Cornered with the threat of surveillance footage from a local corner market, he exhibited zero fear, boldly daring the detective to review the tapes. The bluff held steady. The Those detectives vanished, abandoning their pursuit entirely. Yet, after that crucial tip-off, authorities relentlessly resumed hunting the phantom triggerman who ended the boy's life. Memory painted the bald investigator as a specialist specifically borrowed from the youth division. The hairless detective seemed to anchor the major crimes unit, while his statuesque female colleague spearheaded the intense psychological interrogation. The bald investigator locked eyes with him, an unwavering gaze that sparked a memory from 2017. He recalled the timeline, shifting to 2016, a year before his release, when authorities interrogated him at Southwood State. It was definitively Southwoods, confined within the sterile walls of their medical wing during that period. The killer mused over a victim's family seeking closure, admitting a chilling indifference and absolute numbness toward human mortality. He questioned the purpose of delaying the inevitable, fully aware that his freedom was permanently extinguished. His sudden confession emerged after Jaime's relatives endured over 10 painful years of agonizing, unresolved mystery. The local press barely acknowledged the grim event, reducing his brutal murder to a mere statistic as Camden's 45th homicide that year. Detectives remained quiet, releasing zero case developments and making absolutely no public pleas to identify the elusive suspect. 10 years of suffocating silence finally shattered when a completely separate, horrific bloodbath suddenly exposed every hidden, gruesome detail. Martin discussed this subsequent atrocity with disturbing casualness, displaying a complete absence of appropriate emotional response. He simply described his violent relapse as if it were entirely routine. The murderer taunted investigators, criticizing their methods and reducing the complex legal process to mere paperwork. Detectives denied playing games, but he insisted the chaotic street crowds were actively turning the situation into a spectacle. The interrogators maintained their professional distance, reminding the suspect that they were entirely absent from that specific scene. He expressed dark amusement at the angry bystanders approaching the cruiser, fully aware they despised him for his lethal actions. He mocked the vengeful crowd's hesitation, questioning why anyone seeking true retribution would posture openly before law enforcement. In his twisted logic, a genuine threat would simply ambush the moving patrol vehicle with gunfire instead of posturing. He diagnosed the mob as desperate for attention, harboring a deep disgust for civilian society's perceived foolishness and lack of intelligence. Unlike those craving the spotlight, the killer requested only permanent isolation, demanding to be locked away and completely erased from memory. Apathy dripped from his words as he begged for his cell, entirely uninterested in participating in society's theatrical games. Freedom felt foreign and hostile to a man fundamentally institutionalized, repulsed by what he perceived as society's profound disrespect. Civilian life overwhelmed him with trivial conflicts, from minor behavioral critiques to the relentless pressure of securing immediate employment. He defensively cited his physical state upon moving in with his sibling, noting his weight stood at 320 pounds. Gesturing at his diminished frame, he casually accused his own family of systematic starvation, brushing off the alleged abuse. Resentment festered during those subterranean months, where he felt degraded, forced into silent obedience, like a chained animal. The breaking point arrived when his fierce independence rejected this perceived subjugation and relentless disrespect. He coldly framed his restraint as a temporary favor, insisting his repeated warnings for isolation were the only things delaying her execution. Employment remained an elusive goal, a delayed process he defensively justified to his increasingly frustrated household. A horrific 21-year criminal record acted as an impenetrable wall, ensuring every prospective employer would immediately reject his applications. Reintegrating into normal society proved to be an impossible uphill battle. Bitter memories of domestic friction surfaced, highlighting the sarcastic remarks relatives made regarding his physical exhaustion. He recounted grueling 11-mile treks for employment, resenting his family's refusal to provide transportation despite his promises of future compensation. The killer's only genuinely expressed regret was the chilling realization that one of his intended targets managed to survive. That singular failure gnawed relentlessly at his fractured psyche. Investigators cautiously approached Angel, formally requesting Mr. Muniz to provide a voluntary genetic sample for their forensic analysis. The suspect surrendered to the forensic procedure without a single ounce of resistance. His immediate concern bypassed the gravity of the investigation, shifting entirely to his upcoming meal schedule at the county facility. The authorities confirmed his nutritional needs would be handled upon his transfer. Detectives meticulously secured their legal boundaries, verbally reinforcing his constitutional protection against involuntary biological searches. A bleak, apathetic nod sealed the binding legal waiver. The deeply troubled domestic dynamic between Martin and his sibling remained entirely hidden from public scrutiny and media coverage. Harboring a convicted felon demonstrated profound familial loyalty, an undeniable testament to her unconditional love despite his terrifying criminal history. That tragic compassion was ultimately rewarded with merciless slaughter, an unspeakable betrayal that the perpetrator still views with absolute indifference. While securing the biological evidence, detectives bizarrely catered to a lethal predator, ordering pizza for the monster sitting calmly across their table. Investigators carefully probed his getaway route, theorizing he discarded both the murder weapon and cellular device during his desperate escape. The suspect offered only vague, muttered agreements to the interrogator. He claimed the missing device was misplaced, despite never traveling unequipped. Declining the offered water, he noted they were merely awaiting food. The seasoned investigator offered a quiet, calculated agreement. The detective paused, urging the killer to recall the phone's location. He admitted to carrying it before carelessly tossing the device aside. Reversing course, he insisted he contacted Lourdes, who subsequently alerted authorities. The investigator demanded the true identity of this mysterious woman. He casually identified Lourdes as his former romantic partner. The detective probed what dark secrets this ex-girlfriend might reveal. The suspect confidently assured she would verify his entire morbid narrative. He revealed she managed his telecommunication expenses, prompting further suspicion. Noting her Illinois residency, he suggested the detective contact her directly. The investigator pressed to know if they communicated that exact day. He confirmed speaking with her immediately following the gruesome act. Questioned about his brother-in-law's origins, the suspect feigned profound ignorance. He vaguely recalled the relative claiming an English background, dismissing it entirely. He chillingly reiterated contacting Lourdes mere moments after the bloodbath. She had demanded reasons for the atrocity, met only with empty silence. Panic ensued as both frantically threatened to involve outside individuals. Ultimately, she was the one who notified Ohio law enforcement. He coldly urged the detective to verify the grim details through her. She apparently comprehended the absolute totality of the horrific situation. He speculated she remained awake, anxiously anticipating the inevitable police arrival. He casually confirmed his former partner continued financing his cellular service. Identifying the provider as AT&T, he guaranteed her full complicity in the timeline. The interrogator coldly probed the exact timeline of their past relationship. He estimated over 2 years, ending when his relentless paranoia forced eviction. He verified they had previously shared a tumultuous living arrangement. A chaotic cohabitation with her sibling sparked a violent domestic altercation. Following an assault, a brief incarceration preceded his dark Ohio relocation. Martin estimated his Ohio residency spanned approximately 2 months before the incident. Through video chat, the weeping suspect detailed the slaughter of familiar relatives. This grim interaction exposed a truly disturbing psychological baseline. Martin possessed emotional capacity, alongside a lethal, irrational rage over mundane inconveniences. He described a brief 3-month stint at a local rental establishment. Management trained him for reception, though he despised the restrictive, sedentary role. He recounted a highly tense interaction with a prospective, erratic customer. Suspicious of the patron's finances, he firmly refused the vehicle transaction. Confronting his supervisor, he voiced deep, escalating paranoia regarding the unpredictable client. Feeling unarmed and vulnerable, he declared an absolute inability to defend himself. He abruptly abandoned the very position funding his sister's property lease. At the time, he promised his sibling he would seek conventional employment. Yet, a normal existence remained a remarkably elusive, fragile facade. Just days prior, he had attended a seemingly ordinary interview at Pivot Staffing. His drug screening had come back flagged for illicit substances. He claimed total ignorance regarding the contaminated sample, frantically contacting his sister to relay the grim news. He understood that thoroughly flushing his system was paramount before pursuing any legitimate employment. Her response offered zero comfort, coldly demanding he figure out a solution to an impossible dilemma. He stubbornly refused to rig the screening process, unwilling to engage in further deception. Later that afternoon, his sister and her companion returned, their behavior noticeably erratic and guarded. The psychological strain amplified when she abruptly ordered her son to start preparing a meal. It was 10 o'clock at night when she demanded the child fry up several batches of empanadas. Despite the boy protesting about attending school the next morning, she forced him to cook 3 entire packages for a total stranger. She dismissed her child with absolute indifference, prompting him to privately ask Jayden if the boy had even eaten. The child confirmed his hunger, bringing the grim realization that the entire household had been starved. His sister was forcing her own hungry child to cater to outsiders, while her immediate family suffered in deprivation. Retreating to the basement, a dark, simmering resentment began to brew inside him over the constant neglect. Insomnia quickly set in, feeding his growing paranoia and deep-seated feelings of marginalization. The following day brought a bizarre shift when his sister had a bulk order of household cleaning supplies delivered. He meticulously scrubbed the property before the family returned to prepare a heavy dinner of chicken and macaroni. For a brief moment, a false sense of domestic tranquility seemed to settle over the residence. He withdrew to his makeshift bed in the basement, his feet severely blistered and aching from sheer exhaustion. After resting in the dark, severe hunger finally drove him upstairs, only to find the kitchen completely stripped bare. Every last trace of the meal had been deliberately consumed or hidden away. This perceived slight became the ultimate catalyst. He was already rapidly deteriorating physically, wasting away in his own environment. He had obsessively maintained the property, desperately utilizing chores as a psychological justification for his very existence there. He constantly tried to prove his worth through grueling housework and cooking, all while pounding the pavement for employment. The immense psychological toll of constantly validating his breath simply broke his spirit. His deeply ingrained pride was wounded. Under different circumstances, he fiercely rejected any form of unearned charity. He possessed a rigid, almost pathological desire to be entirely self-sufficient. Society often wrongly assumes formerly incarcerated individuals are fundamentally incapable of securing legitimate civilian work. The true underlying issue was never securing employment, but rather the severe psychological inability to assimilate into civilian social dynamics. Consider the fragile, unwritten ecosystem of a standard corporate workplace environment. A simple clash of temperaments with a mundane coworker could instantly trigger his dormant, defensive hostility. His deeply institutionalized mindset dictated that he refused to show verbal submission to anyone. Operating completely devoid of fear, he viewed basic civilian attempts at de-escalation as profound signs of weakness. Normal workplace conflict resolution felt less like protocol and more like a direct, personal attack on his character. Civilians fundamentally misunderstood the highly dangerous, primal undercurrents his mere presence brought into their spaces. In his fractured mind, any interpersonal friction inevitably spiraled toward extreme physical violence or a fatal conclusion. To mitigate his own volatile nature, he specifically sought out isolated labor, heavily gravitating toward solitary mechanical work. He had ultimately set his sights on an invisible, solitary utility position at the U.S. Cotton Warehouse. His entire survival blueprint relied on configuring machinery in total isolation before quietly vanishing back home. However, grim reality proved far more complicated, systematically unraveling his fragile plan for a quiet, undetected existence. Martin remains a chilling case study of profound institutionalization, demonstrating how minor civilian slights provoke lethal, prison-yard retribution. Within the terrifying confines of his fractured psyche, the perceived indignities had simply reached a catastrophic critical mass. This profound humiliation became his twisted justification for slaughtering multiple innocent victims and forever shattering his surviving bloodline. In a rare, chilling moment of pure self-awareness, he confessed that individuals with his mental architecture should never be released. He openly mocked inmates weeping for freedom, noting that his own 41 years of life included 21 spent entirely caged. He had ominously warned the authorities prior to his release that unlocking his cell door was a catastrophic, unforgivable error. He often questioned why the system ever released him, preferring the quiet routine of incarceration where he actually applied himself. In his early recordings, he admitted to fighting off prison enforcers, though eventually, the institutional violence faded into peaceful routine. Yet, the authorities still inexplicably granted his release. Multiple lives were extinguished, a deeply grim outcome he coldly blamed entirely on the state for refusing to keep him permanently locked away. Re-entering society was never his desire. Destitute, he latched onto a woman he encountered and immediately relocated to her residence. That unsuspecting woman was Lourdes, someone he initially located online. With absolute zero prospects on the outside, he rapidly manipulated his way into inhabiting her personal living space. She handled every financial burden, leaving him utterly devoid of any real adult responsibilities. She willingly funded his entire existence. Whether he demanded electronics or simple luxuries, she purchased them without a single inquiry. Whether it was cellular phones or modern tablets, she provided absolutely everything. Yet, he deliberately sabotaged their arrangement by continuously launching baseless accusations about her supposed infidelity. The unfamiliar comfort of genuine care unnerved him. Feeling trapped by stability, he packed up and began his erratic transient lifestyle. His drifter phase brought him to Texas, spending 9 months near the San Houston base before relocating eastward to New Jersey. He drifted through Marlton for about 8 weeks before eventually navigating his way back to the familiar streets of Illinois. Existing aimlessly, free society rejected him entirely. He eventually confessed the entire gruesome ordeal to Lourdes, spilling every dark detail only after the irreversible damage was done. Upon hearing his chilling admission, she hysterically demanded a motive, to which he offered only a cold, apathetic shrug. He coldly acknowledged the brutal finality of his actions, admitting a fleeting sense of regret over an unchangeable, horrifying reality. Horrified, she immediately contacted the authorities, initiating the very dispatch that ultimately led law enforcement straight to the grisly scene. Had he kept his silence, those tragic fatalities might have remained an absolute mystery, offering him a flawless escape route. The residence was so isolated that those unfortunate victims could have decomposed inside for weeks before anyone noticed their absence. He casually debated trivialities between various spiced meat selections. Chillingly, investigators noted Martin maintained a completely flawless behavioral record during his long incarceration for these homicides, ultimately validating his twisted institutional preference. The penitentiary system stabilized him completely, though eliminating his own relatives was an unequivocally monstrous method of seeking a return. He harbored a chilling level of arrogance, openly boasting to investigators that orchestrating a perfect getaway would have been effortless. His phantom escape plan involved driving his sister's vehicle straight into Pennsylvania, fencing it off, and demanding a fresh paint job. By simply swapping out the registration plates and incinerating the remaining evidence, he could have vanished completely into the shadows. Purely twisted, dark artistry. Dismissing concepts of traditional masculinity, he offered his raw, unfiltered truth, fully aware that his perspective sounded completely deranged. The outside world overwhelmed him entirely. He desperately craved the restrictive walls of a prison cell, unable to function independently. Romantic relationships and societal expectations meant absolutely nothing to his detached psyche. He deeply despised the endless burden of civilian responsibilities, the relentless grind of daily employment, settling personal utility debts, and constantly financing a romantic partner's expensive habits. In his incredibly cynical worldview, satisfying a woman's material desires was an impossible, pointless endeavor that only brought endless frustration. He desperately sought a permanent escape from the romantic partner he was currently tolerating. Utterly destitute in free society and lacking any meaningful possessions, he viewed his return to maximum security as a necessary sanctuary. Although entirely impoverished inside the maximum security penitentiary, he found immense psychological comfort in its rigid predictability and those scheduled, unavoidable daily wake-up calls. He even romanticized the institutional chaos, shrugging off spontaneous cell raids and occasional physical altercations with guards as acceptable risks. That brutal prison environment miraculously offered a structured familiarity he craved, possessing a deeply twisted code of honor where fellow inmates consistently maintained basic interpersonal manners during passing. Civilian society severely lacked such twisted courtesy. To him, the outside world felt profoundly disrespectful. Strangers would thoughtlessly collide into him on the pavement without uttering a simple, basic apology. Overwhelmed by civilian existence, his only genuine desire was to return to his concrete sanctuary, regardless of the grim, horrific consequences awaiting him. Sitting in interrogation, he casually pondered his ultimate fate, genuinely uncertain if his horrific actions would result in a state-sanctioned execution. The prospect of lethal injection remained a chilling unknown. Despite 3 confirmed fatalities, he strangely hoped one specific female victim somehow survived the ordeal. His hatred for the male victim remained chilling, genuinely hoping a fatal medical error guaranteed his demise. His violent priorities were horrifyingly selective. During the investigation, Martin expressed a lingering suspicion about his associate, reflecting on the time they began working together at a local auto repair garage. The tension started when the coworker botched a repair. Desperate to avoid the owner's wrath, he deceitfully shifted the focus onto Martin. On their drive home, the associate spun a web of deception, falsely claiming he had praised Martin for the repairs to build his reputation. Martin immediately saw through the facade, recognizing that rather than receiving a compliment, he was being deliberately positioned as a convenient scapegoat. Desperate to secure permanent employment, Martin confronted the betrayal. Though the coworker insisted he meant well, Martin mentally logged the incident as a critical warning. The underlying hostility escalated during a second incident, fueled by a toxic dynamic with the garage's management team, whom Martin felt were constantly degrading him. The supervisors relegated him to humiliating menial tasks, deliberately tossing garbage on the floor just to assert their dominance and force him to clean it up. Instead of offering support, the associate coldly advised Martin to simply keep his head down and silently obey. Martin refused to endure such humiliation for a meager $50 a day, deeply frustrated that his genuine mechanical expertise was being entirely ignored. Pleading for a chance to prove his worth under the hood, Martin was met only with the coworker's harsh demand to remain silent. The confrontation quickly deteriorated into a bitter verbal exchange, culminating in the associate suddenly accusing Martin of harboring deep-seated racial prejudices. The associate claimed Martin harbored an intense hatred for his demographic, to which Martin chillingly replied that, if true, their interaction would end terribly. When accused of acting tough, Martin delivered a terrifyingly calm promise, warning he could eliminate the man instantly without losing a single ounce of sleep. Tragically, Martin soon proved that those chilling words were an absolute reality. Ultimately, the justice system intervened as Martin admitted guilt to 4 severe charges of lethal violence, resulting in 4 lifelong prison sentences. The court also handed down an additional 16.5 years for the calculated, horrific attack on his own niece. Profound sorrow remains with the surviving relatives, particularly the young niece, who was suddenly stripped of her parents and grandfather in one devastating act. We appreciate your time delving into today's dark narrative. Whether you are a newcomer or a dedicated follower, be sure to explore further. Continue exploring the psychological depths by selecting one of our most baffling investigations, or choose the latest unraveled mystery available on the channel. The chilling case of Martin Muniz serves as a haunting reminder that the human soul is a fragile ecosystem, and the shadows we ignore often become the monsters we face. This isn't just a story of a senseless bloodbath. It is a profound lesson on the lethal intersection of institutionalization and the erosion of empathy. When a man spent more of his life behind bars than in the light of freedom, the system didn't just lock him away, it rewired him. He returned to a world he no longer understood, where a missed meal or a perceived slight felt like an act of war. This tragedy underscores the desperate need for true rehabilitation and the recognition that freedom without a guided path back to humanity is merely a different kind of sentence. But perhaps the most agonizing lesson lies in the betrayal of unconditional love. His sister opened her home and her heart, offering a sanctuary to a brother the world had discarded. To answer such compassion with slaughter is a darkness that defies logic. Let this be a call to vigilance. We must address the cracks in our justice system and the hidden rot of resentment in our communities. Life is a series of echoes. If we do not teach our lost souls how to handle the weight of reality, the silence of our failure will eventually be broken by the sound of a heartbeat stopped too soon. Choose empathy, demand accountability, and never underestimate the power of a spirit left in the dark.